Come on now.
Yeah, we're all on. So, quick announcements before we start. Um, if you would sign in the chat with your name and your affiliation, that helps us with the record keeping we need to have for who comes to committee meetings. We are also recording this meeting, and the recordings get posted on the Hanford.gov website. So I want to make sure y'all know that we do record these things. And with that, we're going to turn it over to our deputy federal official, Gary, to open the meeting.
Well, good morning, everybody. I apologize. I've been suffering through a cough for about 3 weeks now, thanks to all of these allergies. So I'm going to cough through some of this, and I apologize in advance. But I want to welcome everybody to today's meeting of HSEP. We're, of course, going to be following Federal Advisory Committee Act rules throughout this and recording and all of that, which Ruth has already let everybody know about. We're looking forward to a good dialogue today. And of course, the Hanford Advisory Board's role is to provide policy level advice and recommendations concerning the following EM site specific issues: cleanup activities and environmental restoration, waste and nuclear materials management and disposition, excess facilities, future land use and long-term stewardship, risk management, and communications. And without any further ado, I'd like to hand this over to our esteemed Vice Chair, Mr. Richard Bloom. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, actually, if I look at the agenda, it's Ruth's turn.
Oh. Yeah, every committee handles it a little differently. So, first prerogative goes to a chair and a vice chair.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, let me. I'll figure. I don't know if Becky's going to be able to join us. As I said earlier, she gave me a call before my first cup of tea to tell me that she's tied up in a stop work at the 324 building because they thought April was a good month to shut the steam off to the building, and they did, and all the fire protection piping froze. And they're trying to just, the workers aren't that happy relative to the situation of the fire protection, or the firefighters say they won't go in and retrieve them should there be a fire because there's no suppression, and they don't feel comfortable going into the building without support. So we'll see how that works out. But needless to say, that's why Becky's not here. She's thinking of us, and I would assume that she'll be able to catch this on the video. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ruth.
right. So there were basically three things on the agenda today. One, we're electing your leadership for this year. That might be a little awkward without Becky. Um, Looking at the draft work plan for the HAB for the coming year, fiscal year 2023, and how it relates to HSEP and committee business, which in a nutshell was planning for your next meeting because this committee hasn't actually met recently, and trying to get that back on track. So 2 hour meeting, largely administrative to sort of kickstart the committee again. Um, are there questions about the agenda? Anyone?
Yeah, Ruth, I apologize. I got started before Brian was able to jump on with ecology. Is anybody from EPA on?
I don't see anybody from you. Unless we've got one person on the phone, 2285. Who do we have on the phone? probably not EPA. That's always awkward.
You might want to mention how to unmute if they're muted.
Yeah, they're not unmuted. If you're on the phone, unmute is *6. It's just awkward because I'm supposed to keep track of who's at meetings, but that's just the way it is. Richard, what do you think about elections for chair and vice chair? Should we do it or should we postpone it?
Let's go ahead and postpone it. I don't think it'll. We'll continue. How about we'll table it. How's that? I'll use the official. We'll table it to the next meeting and assume the current leadership will stay in place for that aspect. Now unless someone objects, I mean, we have other members out there. Tony, you want to be chairman or vice chairman? Who else we have out there?
I wasn't running for that. In fact, I'm kind of wondering, they're talking about term limits. I've been on quite a long time. Am I still on?
Let me pull up. Okay, this is the
Tony,
current committee list. Did you do the math, Gary? I didn't do the math for this committee.
Yeah, Tony, I think that your term ends at the end of June.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, that I'm about through. So
And
I'll just have to call in if I want to have any input.
Sure. And I think Dan Strom still has some time left. And I think Dan was nominated for another term. So he's a potential. However, we're going to go into the hopefully the last time the HAB will ever have to deal with this, with kind of an appointment limbo, because we've got several folks whose appointments will be ending June 30th. And but and Richard, you're one of them as well. So you'll actually be unappointed until the next appointment letters come out, and we're hoping for that to happen in October, probably now November. But this committee is going to get hit with that, just like Tank Committee was last year. And the good thing is, I think that with some of the changes that we've made, that this will be the last time that we're going to have to worry about appointment limbo.
Yeah. If I use this list, the only person who doesn't either term limit off or end up in packet limbo is Charles Cronball.
That may be correct.
That's my uber quick. Actually, Becky is in the middle of her term, so Becky and Charles are the two that don't end up in limbo.
Well, that's even more reason to defer the discussion. Are you laughing,
who is
Steve?
Charles Cromwell? I can't even remember ever seeing this person.
Well, I know him. I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen him in the meetings, but he must be.
Nick never comes to meetings, does he?
Who?
Nick Bumpus. I've never seen him in a meeting. Have you?
I think he's come once.
Mm.
I mean, we don't have many meetings. And a lot of times they're joint with other subcommittees. But the I don't know if when did Charlie Cromwell join?
Began 2019.
Oh. No, I haven't seen him. Okay.
All right. So let's
Let's move on to See, we're
Gary,
5 minutes ahead. Hi, Liz.
yeah. Gary, do you want to start with the calendar like you did yesterday?
Sure, I like that thought.
Okay, I need to step away real quick for like 2 minutes. So you talk and I'll catch you in a minute.
Who's going to put up the calendar? You want me to put it up? You're
Bruce
muted.
is, and if not, if she can't, then I will.
All right,
Oh,
Ken.
there it is. There we go. Well, folks, Gary Younger again, and I will walk through the calendar, and I want to start off by saying this is a conversation starter. This is by no means the final version of the calendar, but it's the starting point, and I have gone through this with every committee this week, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback, and we're asking for feedback from HSEP so that we can go along and refine the calendar and work plan better to meet the needs of the committee and also support better. So let me tell you a little bit about the coloring that you see on the calendar, and then I'll explain a little bit more about them later. And this looks very similar to what everybody has now with some differences. The blue color, the darker blue, is committee meetings. As you can see, that they are scattered throughout the month, and we've been going through a committee week type format. So you'll see several of the darker blue in sequence there. Based on some of the feedback that we're looking at, we're looking at trying to do something a little bit different. And the reason why you see so many of the darker blue dots is that we're getting a lot of feedback that the meetings are just too long for a lot of folks. And we get that because an 8-hour day is tough sitting in front of a computer in a meeting. So what we're looking at for one of these, one potential change is to kind of break things up into 4-hour blocks so that our minds can rest, so that staff can do everything it needs to be able to get things going together and kind of break things up a little bit. And I'll get more into that a little bit more when we get into work plans. You see two different shades of red there. The brighter red will be board meetings, and that's going to be a presentation meeting. And we're looking at also trying to have those in the evening because, frankly, we're not doing a very good job of reaching out to the public. Many of our board meetings start at 9 a.m. and a lot of the people that we're trying to reach are also working. So we're missing a large swath of the public, and we're trying to look at adding an evening component so that people can have the opportunity to join, go from there. And then the darker red is committee is board work days, because we recognize that in addition to presentations, the board has work to do. Then the light blue that you see is something that's fairly new that hopefully will work out well for us. It's a committee of the whole, and we're looking to add those for every quarter. And those would be 4-hour meetings, 3 to 4 hour meetings, depending on exactly how we schedule it. We haven't had a committee of the whole for 2 years. We're having our first one May 17th in 2 years. And there's a lot of cross-cutting topics that the board can and should work with that kind of transcend what a particular committee can work with. Also, it gives the board maybe some additional work time if it needs. So committee of the whole spots on there would be primarily used for that. And like I said, everything that's on here right now is negotiable because, you know, we want to be able to be more efficient with people's time. Yes, Richard.
Well, I just want to jump in. So what you're saying is the board meetings, the true board meetings would be on the evenings, Tuesday evenings, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no.
Well,
What I mean is the presentation component would be in an evening, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Tuesday evening.
well, I
And then-
just want to bring that up, that both West Richland, Richland, and Kennewick and Pasco all have city council meetings Tuesday evenings.
Good
So
thought.
you have
Appreciate
just
that.
eliminated all elected officials that might be on the board.
That's why this is firmly in jello right now. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And
And
I'm
what-
making that note right now.
What time were you in expecting this to begin?
We were looking at 5 to 7:30.
Okay.
So maybe that could be moved to Wednesday or something like that. So, you know, like I said, this is a conversation starter. Then the darker red that you see there would be committee work times. Excuse me, board work times, because you need to have an opportunity to discuss some things and board work to take place. And, you know, that would be designated right close by. Given your comment, Richard, you know, we can juggle that around a little bit. The yellow blocks that you see are set for leadership conferences, and I've already gotten a lot of feedback that 3 half days is too much, so we'll be looking at doing something different there. The purple that you see, those are federal holidays, which means federal offices and for the most part, the HAB would be closed during that time. And July is pretty much blocked off to have no meetings. That's been traditional, where we give staff and folks a month off to be able to take vacations as necessary and things like that. So we don't have some of the national meetings that typically fall into place, like the first week of May. A few of us are going to be participating in the EMSSAB meeting, which is basically a meeting of all the board chairs. That's not on here because we don't have all those dates nailed down yet. But those are some other considerations as we are looking at this calendar. So what we'll do is we will take feedback from the committees, and we will come up with a new calendar that we should be able to show at the EIC meeting here. I think it's next week. There's some modification, and then once again, we'll look at it during the leadership conference, which will be middle of next month. Any other questions on the calendar before we flip over to the work plan?
So the clarification is, this is the calendar for the next fiscal year. So don't look at this May and March and think that's like now. This is a year from now.
Well, but let me, one comment is that if you move the HAB meeting to a Wednesday evening, that seems to be the least pressure on elected officials.
I'll take that comment, and as we rework this, we'll go with that.
I mean, or Monday, but you know, most city council meetings moved to Tuesday because they wanted a day the first day of the week to be able to interact with staff, you know, prior to the meeting and resolve issues.
which makes sense. So we'll look at moving that's not a problem. Like I said, this is a first shot conversation starter, and there's nothing that's nailed down just yet.
Okay.
So Ruth, now if we can go to, and I think you're flipping over to the work plan.
You're out again.
And Gary,
And
this is shared with the other committees?
yes, all committees are seeing this, and then BCC is the only committee that hasn't seen it yet, and they'll see that this afternoon. And it's also in every packet that's gone out. So the first part of this document, everybody has seen because it's mostly cut and paste from the current work plan. Some tweaks in there as we go along. But for the most part, it's 90% solution from what is current right now. And we've been getting some good feedback, and I see Liz is on, and she's given us some good feedback on some things that as we get everybody's comments, we'll reconcile and put those into a freshened document that we'll go to. And if you'll keep scrolling a little bit more, yes. Yeah, back just a titch, please, where we see what the titch more. Right there, we see the description of Health, Safety, and Environmental Protection Committee. That's basically your description of things that this committee should be looking at and going forward. And then now if you can scroll on to the, let's see, presentation. Yes, keep going up. Right there, we've got the description, and this is where we're going to update some of the descriptions based on feedback. So basically, presentation meeting 5 to 7:30. Our board work meetings will be split up into 2 3 to 4 hour chunks. Right now, it's listed as 3-hour chunks, but that could change a little bit, where you're going to have discussion during one component and then action in a different one. Like I said, we're still working through this. Committee of the whole will be quarterly, and we'll take care of a lot of the work that the boards need to be doing. Committee meetings, right now, we're looking to still maintain those in a virtual format, with board meetings and committee of the wholes looking to go to, excuse me, board meetings only to start off with in a hybrid format. The reason for that is, you know, a lot of people have taken classes or lectures and things like that in a virtual format. Trying to do a facilitated meeting is a little bit more difficult, and we're trying to figure that component out. It's also a little more expensive to do that, and it requires increasing the facilitation team capabilities in order to do that. Once we get that figured out, we're going to start small before we get big. And we've got some folks coming into town next week to start working through that so we can learn and figure out what we don't know at this point. Work through that, and then once we get that figured out, get costs figured out, things like that, then we can expand it. So for the near term, we're looking at keeping committee meetings virtual, and then going from there. If you'll scroll down a little bit more, Ruth, to where we're starting to look at board presentation meetings. what I'm trying to do is script out for the year what it is we're going to be talking about during these meetings. Of course, we're going to start out with the typical agency updates, DOE, EPA, and ecology, talking about recent accomplishments and what's in the near horizon. It's something that we've started off our board meetings for quite a while, and we're looking to do that going forward. And in the evening component, we're envisioning having it more in a conversational style, where folks will have greater access to senior management and will be able to ask those questions at that point. And then we'll have an additional presentation during that time, and it'll be themed. And we'll basically just kind of walk around the site. And I'm envisioning that we'll have kind of an in-depth discussion of what goes on with the waste treatment plant and DF law. And there's a lot of people out in the public who don't understand a lot of that. So what we want to do is be able to open up those conversations and allow people to get some questions answered. And then, just like I said, keep walking around the site in kind of a Hanford 101 type format, where it's conversational. Folks will get a chance to have access to senior leaders, subject matter experts, ask their questions, and hopefully walk away fairly satisfied. These are not in stone, which means we can move some things around. And if there's any emerging topics that come up, we can pop those topics in as we need to. But this is kind of a roadmap and conversation starter to see where we can go from there. Ruth, then if you'll scroll down to the next section where it says board work meetings, this would be the second component of board meetings, where you have the presentation. Now you get down and do the work. The only thing that's not scheduled right now is a member orientation. And we're trying to get back into that business where we bring new members in and we discuss particular items to help set them up for success as they begin work on committees and on boards. It's not scheduled right now because that's going to be event driven, and that event will be the appointment letters. We tried to set this up last year in October, and folks hadn't been notified in time for appointments, so we had to move that orientation to December. So that we're going to hold off the schedule till we get a little bit closer to that opportunity. If you also notice, in April, we're looking at trying to schedule in a site tour. We think we'll be able to do that and put it on the schedule, and should be able to do that. We're also really looking forward to trying to get folks out on site this year, trying to pick a date in June. It might be during the June board meeting. It might be a day or two away from that. We're still trying to figure that part out, but as the pandemic loosens its grip, the pandemic is not in our rearview mirror yet, nor will it be for a while, but try to open it up so we can show the tremendous accomplishments and success that we've had over the past couple of years and get people back out there. Our virtual tour program is great, and we've got a lot of interest in it, but the board needs to be able to get out and see things that we're asking you to write advice on. So that's what we've got plugged in. Ruth, if you could scroll down a bit more, please. Yes, Richard.
So obviously the site tour is in person, and let me jump back to the calendar. And that's so that's tied to the April board meeting. Is Is that sort of why you tied that in?
For now, that is correct. And like I said, it's flexible to be different if necessary.
Well, I mean, except I know that the site emergency preparedness or site drill will be, I think it's April 20th this year. Is that correct? I remember seeing a flyer. So that's got to be factored in, because I definitely don't want to be trapped in a little trailer out there in the middle of a site tour. So
Definitely correct.
I've done that before. Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to do that again. So yes, that will be changed based on site. But we're just putting something on the wall to try and lean forward to.
Well, I mean,
Committee
I
of the
was
whole-
thinking
I wanted
it
to
might
break,
be,
if I could, a second.
Yes,
Well,
go ahead.
Richard and I gave a presentation several years ago on radiation and radiation effects. I think that would be a nice thing for maybe Richard and Dan Strom to do. We got a lot of new people that really don't understand what we're talking about, and I think that with Richard and Dan, that would be something you want to put in one of these whole committee meetings.
the other point is, if you do a site, I was going to go back to the site tour. If you do the site tour, it'd be better to do it before, you know, on the 18th rather than the 19th, but that's okay. I mean, because of what you've got in the schedule being the evening presentation on the 18th. That's just my thought, is to do the site tour before we have the meeting rather than sort of in the middle of the meeting.
Good feedback. I appreciate it. And then we can adjust as we go.
Okay.
That's why we're putting it out during committee meetings, so that we can get your feedback. And if you want to write something down, in fact, Ruth can give you a Word version of this, and you can make your comments and send it back. We can collect and we can make adjustments as we go. See, I think Steve has his hand up.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to endorse Tony's idea of a discussion of radiation effects. Some of us have been around a long time, and our ignorance level is still pretty high. So it would really be valuable, I think, to have that conversation, and maybe have that conversation periodically, so that as we deal with public health and worker safety and such, we have some sense of reality of what we're talking about, instead of just perceiving what we think is risky. So I really endorse Tony's idea.
I mean, it's not only health effects, it's demonstrations of what it is to just get dressed. I remember we had the presentation on what a Scott Air Pack was like, and brought in the Scott Air Pack. You know, these are things that you know, bring reality to the HAB that you know, the workers are actually putting up with, and it explains a lot, you know, from a DOE perspective, why nothing gets done. I mean, you got an 8-hour day and or a 10-hour day, and you're doing good if you got 5 hours of work out of it. So I bring that perspective to this whole concept of using the HAB as a vehicle of explaining what's going on. And some of these could be, you know, can be a virtual presentation, but until you pick up a Scott Air Pack, you don't quite realize how much of a pain it is. And when you walk around in it for an hour, you definitely learn what the pain is, because I've done that. So that's 2 bits.
In fact, I was writing that down. That might be a good topic, Richard. So I appreciate that comment. Then as we've got the committee of the whole meetings, even there. February, of course, is typically when all the committees collaborate to write cleanup priorities advice. So I would see that input would be gathered prior to February 9th, and then February 9th be used as the day to hammer that advice out and get a pre-consensus so that when you have the next board meeting, it can go through fairly easily at that point. Then as we scroll down toward committee meetings and proposed topics, once again, I'm trying to map out some issues and potential topics to deal with. As you can see, it's kind of light right now for HSEP, and we're trying to get better at that. And that's why, like I said, I'm looking for input. And it's probable that combining HSEP in with some other committees would be useful. Yes, Richard.
I just want to jump in. Let me lay out a calendar, a HAB calendar. So you're anticipating in the future we will have all HAB members blessed by October. Is that correct?
We hope.
I mean, is that the goal? I mean, let's assume everyone is appointed and approved by October 3rd. Then what I would recommend is that the October subcommittee meetings be actually hybrid, meaning give an opportunity for the subcommittees to actually get together in person. The HSEP topic could be the things that that Tony talks about, you know, some of the safety aspects to present to all the other, and the other groups could join us if they were in town. And so, and October is not a terrible travel month to speak of. I know this would affect your budget, but I think it would make the HAB much more effective. And so the HSEP topic for October would be to teach the other subcommittees safety and environmental protection.
Got it down, and I think Ruth might be making some notes, which is very helpful.
And I'm just saying, it's not a committee meeting. It's a, you know, it's a meet and greet, if you wish.
Sure. And that's a possibility. And if we can't do it during committee time, maybe that might be something that we're looking at for committee of the whole, because the committee of the whole meeting that we've got, the first one for this new calendar would be November 10th. So if we don't have the packets approved by this point, then we could potentially look at the committee of the whole being an in-person meeting somewhere.
And so the HSEP topic could be preparing for that committee of the whole, and say it'll be an HSEP, right?
Yeah, if we want to do that. And there's absolutely no reason why a committee can't drive presentations for other committees.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of more for not the, in this case, just introduction to reality out at Hanford.
Sure. Which is important, and that's kind of trying to go into more conversational. And I really do like your idea of the radiation suits and air packs and things like that, and maybe actually have somebody putting one on to show what goes into that, plus you know, how, because it does take, you don't just jump into a radiation suit like you do pants and shirt or skirt or whatever. It takes a little bit of time, and a lot of times it's not just a one person operation. You need somebody else to assist with that. And the more you talk about that, Richard, the more I really like that idea.
Well, I just, you get pretty good getting in. It's getting out that's the hard part.
Yes. I like it.
All right.
Yeah, so you've got lots of things, and Liz, I see you popping things into the chat. It would be great if we just go on and put you on next, so that Ruth can capture some of your thoughts and use for comments on the calendar there. So Ruth, take it away. I mean, Liz, you want to talk about what you have here?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And I know a long time ago we did, I think it was air monitoring. We've done, I've been to so many meetings, like which one, what happened when. But I think Becky came and showed, like, just did a demonstration of putting on some PPE, some personal protective equipment. And that's nice when you can do it in person. It could even be possible virtually if we had a good camera.
But you don't get to pick it up.
What's that?
You don't get to feel the weight of the thing.
Yeah. And then it just seems like that could be a really interesting topic for new members to just get that overview of how are workers protected on site, what kind of monitoring equipment do they wear, kind of how teams work together with different equipment, like equipment that you wear individually and then equipment that is used to measure radiation levels. I like that idea for especially for new members to just get that overview. But I also had toxic chemical vapors, tank vapors, however you want to put it on there, and safety culture, which we've talked about a lot in the past, but it's been a while since we've done another dive into those topics. And it seems like maybe just adding those placeholders for HSEP is helpful as committees work on adding notes into the calendar and work plan, so that when EIC compiles it or however that process works, we don't miss out on HSEP meeting, because I think then it would need to talk to the calendar too and make sure there's space reserved for that. Thanks.
Sure. I appreciate the comments, Liz. And one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I've said it at a couple of the other meetings and haven't gotten to it here yet, is that as we get more into operations and we do more outreach to the public, one of the things that I want to try to do is have a series of, for lack of a better term, several Hanford 101 type briefings to, highlight several things. What do we have out there? And I'm really liking the idea of a presentation on, the PPE and the suits and tanks and the various bits of detection equipment that's out there. And, so that we can educate not only members and the public, but frankly, there's folks who have been on the board for a while who maybe either haven't been exposed to some of this information, or it's been a while since they've been exposed to it. And I'm a newbie here. I've only been here 3.5 years, and there's so much that I don't know that I learn every day, and want to share that knowledge with everybody. And I think it'll make for really good outreach on that. And then, so yeah, you can see my proposed topic list for committee meetings for the year. And what I'm trying to do is give some predictability and some thoughts well in advance so that we can kind of discuss things, well, 6 months out rather than 2 weeks out, so that we kind of have a good roadmap there. Like I said, these are open for discussion and topics can change. And if we have something that is emerging, then we can substitute that in there as well. But like I said, this is completely a conversation starter and completely open to adjustment. And I know that Ryan Miller from Ecology and Roberto Armijo from EPA are on, and I'd like to stop for just a second and give them an opportunity to say anything from a regulatory perspective. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I could just share what I've shared the last couple of days is that our agency, Ecology, we're reviewing the work plan on our end and kind of gathering our feedback and thoughts. And I know that we're going to be meeting with EPA and DOE next week to take a look at these edits that we have that EPA has and some of the feedback we've gotten from the HAB, and we'll work to implement the work or to implement the edits to the draft that Gary has here. So I think that's all I have, but looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, and hi everyone, Roberto Amijo from EPA. I think Ryan summed it up pretty well. So I would echo Ecology's perspectives. And we're working with it with our team over at the Hanford Project Office, and looking forward towards our next week's meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, I wanted to break in again. I don't know how to do it. How do I get my hand raised?
You can just type in
just
the
speak.
Okay. I like the ideas that we're having up there, but what I had more in mind was more a tutorial on what the radionuclides are out there, what the biology of those radionuclides are, what the radiation effects are, and what the risks are. And so that's, I think, a little different than just showing up how we put on a suit. And so I thought that Richard and I did it once, and I thought it was helpful. And I think if Richard and Dan do it when I go off, that might be good.
Yeah, Tony, I wasn't discounting that, but the concept I had is that actually can be done virtually. I mean, whereas I think the actual aspects of bringing people into what I would say the Hanford reality, that's tough to do virtually. I mean, it's different. And my question would be could this be, rather than the committee of the whole that we were talking about in November, actually being a sort of a hammer day approach, because that would give us all the various tools all in one spot where we can move from spot to spot within Hammer, because that's where you could see the dress, undress, the rad protection, some of the training aspects. There's so much at Hammer, and we don't, it would be a tour rather than a Hammer tour would be more appropriate to, rather than a committee of the whole type of thing, Gary. I mean, just because we don't want too much public, but you might want some news. That's my thought.
Well, and I do like the idea that of what you're talking about, and Hammer is a great resource that we need to talk more about. So I think that's the product of this conversation is I have, one point of view, and other individuals have points of view. But then once we start talking about the collective and do the collaboration here, that's where we get a better product. So I'm loving what it is that you're talking about, because I frankly barely know where Hammer is, and I've not attended any of the training sessions there. And I know that a lot of people have been far more involved, and yeah, that's a knowledge set that is important, that we need to be able to share with the general public. So I appreciate it.
Okay, and so I'm jumping ahead to what the HSEP subcommittee would be working on in October. And whether we can fit in some of what Tony was talking about for RAD 101. But sometimes Hammer wants to show off everything, and Becky and I are both very familiar with everything Hammer has, and some of it is nice to have, but it's not applicable to the HAB really. Anyway, so I see your notes. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, Richard, that sounds good to me also. And the other thing is, when I go off the committee, I still might want to call in sometime. How do you go about calling in and getting on the phone when
You have to be,
ask for call-ins?
you just have to make sure that you keep Ruth's email address and tell her you want to be on the notifications as a interested party, because all subcommittee meetings are public meetings, correct?
Correct. So
Yes,
we can
what
add
Richard
you
said.
to the interested parties list, which means you will get the weekly updates on Thursdays that tell you what meetings are coming up, what activities are coming up, and the board stuff automatically gets sent to the interested parties list. We actually used to have interested parties lists for each committee. We don't at the moment, but we can, if we know that that's your thing, we can figure out how to make sure you get notices.
Thank you. I like that.
You just don't get a vote, Tony.
I know.
Liz.
Thanks. I'm wondering if we can just make a note about, well, I wanted to share for people who weren't at the other meetings this week, that one thing that a few people have given feedback on is the concept had been it looks like the way HSEP's set up right now, there's just one meeting for the year plus a joint meeting. That there would be a presentation day and a discussion day a month later. And there's been quite consistent feedback that splitting, like there should be discussion following the presentation, and just split it into two. So there'd be presentation discussion, a month later, presentation discussion. So just looking at the schedule, like for April and May, instead of having pick an HSEP, I mean, it may be a joint topic, but it would be kind of two meetings on, and you'd have to pick the topic for each day. I'm just wondering if we can add placeholders for HSEP, so that I know sometimes it's hard to add meetings if it's harder to add meetings than take them away. So for since each of these blocks is a 2-month period, or 3 months for August, September, if there's a way to add a note to add something for January, February, and the August, September, if HSEP folks are interested in doing that.
Let me jump in there. One of the topics, I'm jumping ahead for the committee business, but in the leadership workshop, the question goes down to is whether HSEP takes on the responsibility for these tremendous number of documents that are coming out for review, for public review, to do a Reader's Digest version of what those documents are from a perspective of what the HAB as a whole is looking at. I think when the more recent discussion we had on the Hanford, what was just expanded, the Hanford what was the document that we just got extended for 2 weeks?
The life cycle report?
Life cycle report. What its purpose, and put it in perspective for the HAB, to have that discussion in the HSEP subcommittees of, we have 54 change notices or 54 different permit changes last year, I believe. I've had calls come in asking why these are that way, and it's something that I think as a placeholder, it would be appropriate for HSEP to have a placeholder where, virtually we can discuss what documents are in play and take over the environmental document sort of review and queue up whether, the tank waste committee should be concerned or RAP should be concerned, and coordinate with those subcommittees the document review, which I don't think the subcommittees have time or really the motivation in a great extent to do that. But that's something I was thinking of talking about in the May workshop meeting.
Just to make sure it's clear, and maybe you guys only want one meeting in the year, but it seems like there's lots of topics. It seems like if HSEP wants a placeholder for other meetings, we need to put a note in for other months, just so that it doesn't get left off the work plan.
Right, and that's what I'm agreeing with you, Liz. I'm just saying that I think what I'm looking at is possibly expanding the role of HSEP into some other areas.
And I'm willing to add meetings on here as necessary or requested. And like I said, everything is firmly in jello.
Right, and we are going to discuss this work plan in May, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the proposed schedule is each committee taking a look at the draft work plan this week from the committee perspective. Chairs and vice chairs then go to the leadership workshop in May, and with the TPA agencies come up with the draft to send to the full board in June. This year, the proposal is to actually adopt the work plan in June because of this whole packet gap dilemma, so that the board has a work plan and a schedule going into the fall, and we don't end up like where we were last fall, where we didn't have a work plan, we didn't have a schedule, and we were having trouble with who was appointed and who wasn't, and the limbo didn't help us.
Right.
Yeah.
We can discuss it further in the May leadership meeting, but to some extent, I'm thinking that the HSEP subcommittee meeting could be coordinated with some of these public meetings with, as a sort of a side note of some of the public meetings on the permit changes and things of that nature. And it may, by having HSEP involved, it may actually expand some of the public exposure to HAB. It would just take some coordination.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the work plan or calendar so that we can go on and work on committee business?
Okay, we've got the executive, the EIC meetings are hardwired in on the plan. And Dan, I see your hand. I'm going to scroll down here so you can see the topics under HSEP. Dan Strom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, we have learned that public health measures can sometimes conflict with public welfare. For example, closing schools may have been good for public health, but school closings were bad for public welfare, creating havoc for parents and lowering the quality of education for many. In radiation protection, we have regulations that state that exposures to radiation and radioactive materials should be kept as low as reasonably achievable, economic, social, and technological factors being taken into account. This is known as ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. Clearly, some of the public health measures taken for management of COVID-19 risks failed the reasonably achievable criterion because they ignored the social aspect, the public welfare. My question is, should the HSEP committee consider the reasonableness of Hanford cleanup that is driven largely by outdated drinking water standards that do not accurately reflect our current knowledge of human health risk? So our name is health, and by that I take it to mean both public and occupational health, safety, and environmental protection. But we seem to be doing this without thinking about public welfare. And I think that's a topic that you have to address in order to get to the reasonableness criterion in radiation protection. Maybe this is out of the scope of HSEP, but I thought I'd ask that question. Thank you.
Steve, your hand's up. Why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, thank you. Daniel, I agree with you very, very strongly. When I can contemplate all of the history of Hanford and real and perceived risk and the future of Hanford and the HAB and the public involvement, I think those kinds of understandings would really help our conversation, because oftentimes we develop our concept of advice and issues based on opinion and strength of passion. And we don't often have that balanced conversation. So I would very strongly endorse what you're saying for the future of the HAB.
And I think EPA may want to jump into this, but one of the topics that I was going to suggest, which really personally I have a little conflict on, because I am supporting the WA1 work planning effort, but when remedial actions are actually evaluated, they do a risk-based evaluation, and that's something that I think the health and safety environmental protection, looking at that document that eventually comes out at the end, would be very informative to how risk is evaluated. We've had a lot of discussions in the HAB over whether sweat lodges should be the driving risk point for those decisions out in the 100 areas. I mean, Liz can jump in. I believe she's more intimate in that conversation. But it becomes a question of what the path um, to the individual or the proposed individuals, what his effect would be. And I know that as I'm told that even the drinking water standard isn't adequate to protect a person in a sweat lodge boiling off that water, if that's not my understanding. But those are the kind of conversations we can have. I'm not quite sure we're ever going to get a consensus on that outcome. So just to respond to Dan's comment, I don't disagree. I've I always felt that the 400 area water, which was above 20,000 picocuries per liter tritium, tasted better when I made my coffee, but that's beside the point. I think a little tritium makes it taste better.
Brian or Roberto, do you have perspectives on this piece of the conversation?
Hi, this is Roberto. I don't have a whole lot to offer on this item, this conversation, but I do know that there are opportunities for public comment when it comes to remedial actions in association with ecological and human health risk exposures. So when those documents do come out from DOE, I highly encourage taking a closer look at those.
Okay. I think we've discussed that, but it's a topic. I think I agree, Dan, that it's a topic for HSEP to sort of frame up for the overall committee. I mean, dimethyl mercury is another one that one molecule in the atmosphere triggers a tremendous lot of paper out there. Anyway, so with that, what is our? We are through our discussion of the work plan. I mean, other than you want to add a topic into the committee, I mean, my view is we would have a topic which was document review. Permitting other documents out for public comment. I think that would be an appropriate topic to put into health and safety, environmental protection with potential advice. May not be our advice. It may be to advise some of the other subcommittees to make advice.
Liz?
Can we add the other topics from above here too? Because it might help with adding things to the calendar. I think it's vapors, good vapors, safety culture.
Well, that's that general worker safety and health. We've expanded that to.
Well, I think that's going to be too much for one meeting.
Oh, well,
I would see these as separate topics. So that HSEP has more than one meeting in a calendar year.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just am curious because I don't think there's going to be consensus either on this issue of health standards and drinking water standard, but I think there's I think it's a rich topic to talk about and just kind of get different positions out on the table. I don't know what the overarching topic would be, but that could be another one to have on the list.
No,
yeah.
My view is it's an appropriate topic for the HAB to discuss. It's not something that we agree that we disagree on certain aspects. And I see I appreciate the aspect of the tribal aspects of their treaty rights and things of that nature. But again, it's got to be put in perspective of reality of what we can or whether they have to use Hanford site water to do their sweat lodge type of approach. So anyway, I mean, it's a topic that needs to be discussed, that people need to have an appreciation for. And like I said, I don't expect consensus either way.
Would the overarching topic be health and safety standards? Just as a catch-all, we just need a name for it so that it doesn't get lost.
I think risk-based health and safety standards would be the.
You know, I've just finished writing a paper in health physics on the biology of the radionuclides in the Hanford tanks. And I think that from that, the cesium and strontium are the big hitters. A lot of these long-lived radionuclides, iodide 129, technetium, are not a health hazard. I think that's something that we need to have people recognize. Those are not a health hazard.
All right,
Well,
Steve Wigman.
Yeah, I was just wondering if a couple things. Tony, can you share that writing with the board?
Yeah, it should be published this month in Health Physics, and so it'll be available then.
Okay, that would be great, because I think that perspective would really help us think about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I would just like to make a comment about discussion versus consensus. I know that our charter is to focus on consensus advice, but I think the greater value from the perspective of the public is really the conversation of issues that are relevant. And so I don't have a problem with us discussing issues that do not necessarily result in advice.
Right. It wouldn't. Right.
Short vignette. When I started working with FACA 30 years ago, my first FACA group was with the Forest Service, and the problem was, how do you manage the woods with the spotted owl in it? And the the DFO was also the forest supervisor, and the group got really frustrated because they wanted to come to agreement on recommendations about how to do this. But the folks in the group ranged from the people who had filed the original lawsuits around spotted owls to people who were literally losing their jobs in mills in small communities. So it was kind of a wide range. But the forest supervisor, what he wanted out of those meetings actually weren't recommendations. He just loved hearing the debates and the conversation around how on earth are we going to do this. And the only rub was he wasn't good at helping the group understand that he was getting incredible value out of these meetings, and the group was really frustrated because they weren't making recommendations. So for some topics, it really is the conversation and the juxtaposition of perspectives that is useful for agencies here. Liz.
I just thought of two other topics that one I was supposed to bring up, which was maybe we already put it in under the wrap. I can't remember the environmental, the like wildlife monitoring report. Do you remember what that was called? I know someone looked it up. I think it was Chris Sutton. And then the other one was, and it just depends on when we get to work on the agenda for the committee of the whole. If the CLEP, the comprehensive land use plan, is that right? And kind of different land use scenarios, like industrial use, or just kind of how that plays into worker health and safety, or not worker health and safety, but environmental protection and safety. It seems like that could also be a good place to have some of those discussions about standards. Thanks.
Right, and that would get us into a MATCA discussion and things of that nature.
So the other piece of this discussion is, in addition to the work plan. So Richard, you and I'm going to send this markup to you and Becky and the TPA agencies, and it will add to the collection of committee markups, because we didn't mark up one single document because it would have been really messy looking by now.
Right. Now, the only other thing that I bring up with the overall aspect is, and this is something for Gary to consider, is way back in the beginning of it, objectives and scopes, etc. The language that comes out of the EMSSAB charter probably should be out there. You know, advice and recommendation to the DOE concerning the EM site-specific issues. I mean, the language that's out in the current charter, or maybe the future charter that's going out there, should be up there. It's sort of there, but it's not the explicit EM. I mean, some discussion of us being part of the EM SSAB.
And Richard, I appreciate the comment, and we just got an updated charter that I haven't yet had an opportunity to read. So yeah, those are great thoughts, and yes, how this fits within the framework of the EMSSAB charter is helpful.
Yeah, and the charter, that objective and scope has typically not changed over the years. You know, as I reviewed them all recently.
Gary, we probably should send that to the EIC for next week's conversation. Not that they have to talk about it, but they ought to know what it is.
Sure, and that's a good thought.
Now that's a draft at this point, correct?
Well, the EMSSAB charter is renewed every 2 years.
Right.
So this is the current version. So it is the official signed charter from on high. And
the 2020?
2022. So yeah, the current one that's on the HAB website is the 2020 version, and
Right.
will update to the 2022. And I haven't yet had a chance to look at them to see what the differences are.
Okay.
Yeah, so we should probably ping that so Josh can put it up on the website too.
That makes a lot of sense, and that was part of my task list for the day.
Josh is like, my list.
Yeah,
is
being
long
in
again.
meetings kind of get in the way of work. But yeah, I've got a heavy inbox, and that's one of those items, and that'll be flagged for attention to deal with sooner rather than later.
Our list for next week is getting long. So sending this to your committee leadership, the other thing that Richard and Becky are going to need are any topics from you all in addition to the work plan that you want them to bring to the leadership retreat, leadership workshop, to work on. I am shamelessly lobbying for a little bit of discussion about how the work plan gets implemented in terms of making meetings and processes work better, like not too bureaucratic, but enough that there's integrity in how stuff gets done. So other ideas about what you want Richard to take forward to that conversation. separate from the work plan.
It's silent. I've
That's
already,
okay.
I've
have
already
to-
thrown my comment out there. That's where I just wanted to bring out what I was looking at. The other topic we'll probably present is, or bring up is the transition back to work out there and traffic issues and transportation issues out there, because I know, Becky brought up the, the recent death out there at the intersection. And, like I said before, I can put my Ben Franklin Transit hat on, which will be an interesting meeting tonight, but, I'm pushing to get bus service out to Hanford. And I truly want DOE not to get in the way of it. There's, what I'm proposing is consistent with union contracts and DOE's responsibilities. So all we need is their not objecting. So I think it would be a good point. Mr. Wigman, you jumped your hand up.
Yeah, I was just contemplating a conversation I'm going to have with the House Committee on Energy and Commerce or something like that next week. And one of the issues they're interested in is safety issues on site. And my sense is that we've got things pretty well under control in most areas, but that traffic safety might be the greatest challenge.
It still represents the greatest risk to a Hanford worker.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
I mean, you weren't commuting out there on 10-hour days, which if you're exempt, turn into 12-hour days, which you add another hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. So
yeah, when I commuted out there, it was 14-hour days.
Yeah, right. That's sort of what mine were. Ginger.
Steve. Oh, sorry.
I would say that it's the greatest threat to the Tri-Cities, because those people come off site after a 12-hour day, and then they end up at whatever intersection drowsy driving. And it would be really interesting. I've always thought it would be really interesting to track accidents around the Tri-Cities between the 5 and 6 o'clock or whatever, 4 and 6 o'clock hour, and what direction they were traveling and where they were coming from.
Much to my amazement, getting to see the van pool statistics, our van pools out there did very, very well over the years. So anyway, Mr. Strom, you have your hand up.
I did a study of mortality of workers at Hanford from 1943 until the data ran out. And I'd be glad to share that with you. The last version I was at one of the Hanford history meetings over in Pasco. But you're correct about transportation, but also that the Department of Energy generally does not include transportation accidents as part of its occupational fatalities. And so, this kind of crazy accounting, I don't know what you can do. For example, there were, I believe it was 12 people killed in a plane crash in 1978 at the Richland airport. And that was when, that was the last commercial flight out of the Richland airport. That flight ended commercial flight service to Richland. And on that plane where just a whole bunch of DOE, Hanford, and Battelle people who lost their lives. They wouldn't have died had they not been flying to Washington, D.C. to do their jobs. Interestingly, there were 4 people killed in a railroad head-on collision in the late 1940s. The engineers and firemen on both trains were killed in a train wreck in a fog out at Hanford. And that's the only transportation accident that's accounted for. Now, mind you, those fatalities do not include, those are kind of hard hat and handrail safety fatalities, pinch points, electrocutions, drowning, crushing, steam burns. Those have all happened at Hanford. What we can't include, because we don't know the numbers exactly, would be the deaths due to radiation exposure at Hanford. At some risk, some people would say that over the Hanford site, the collective dose at Hanford would have probably caused somewhere between 40, 50, that number of excess cancer fatalities. But those fatalities are different from the hard hat and handrail fatalities in that they don't take much time off your life. The lost life expectancy for most of these cancer deaths is somebody gets cancer at 65 instead of a heart attack at 75, so it shortens their life by 10 years. Whereas the people who die in these transportation accidents tend to be 20 or 30, and a lot of the other safety problems, electrocutions, pinch points, that kind of thing, are much younger and their lives are shortened. So it's hard to compare, but I would be glad to share that analysis with the committee. I would point out that there's one exception. DOE did count 12 people who were killed in a plane crash who worked for the DOE coal research outfit in Morgantown, West Virginia. There was a US Airways plane that crashed. And DOE did count those as occupational fatalities. So I don't think there's any rules, and I don't really know how to deal with that. But if anyone is interested, I could share those data.
I would suspect the occupational fatality, if it occurred in a DOE vehicle, would be counted. But that's the closest we've come was when we had the rollover of the Guzzler out at 2 West, back in 2014. That was the most significant accident involving a DOE vehicle that I know of, when they had a tire blowout and it rolled that truck. But
well, DOE did own the railroad engines that crashed,
right,
the Atomic Energy Commission, and so that would be consistent with your DOE vehicle reporting.
Right.
So,
but the airline fatality in Morgantown, West Virginia was that was US Airways. It wasn't a DOE airplane, so who knows. But I would point out that almost all of or more than half of the fatalities occurred before the end of World War II. Hanford had I think we lost about 25 people in 43, 44, and 45 at Hanford. Now remember that the people who built Hanford were all either scientists and engineers, or they were people who were unfit for the draft in World War II. And so we actually had a lot of health problems in the construction workforce at Hanford. And ever since, Hanford has been, in terms of occupational fatalities, far safer than other professions. You can't even analyze Hanford without averaging over 10 or 15 years, because most years there are no fatalities. So anyway,
right.
So let's get back on agenda.
Well, this is the agenda. It's a topic for leadership. So, all right.
I think one last thing to do, if I'm reading this right, which is talking about your next meeting, and do you want to meet in August? And if so, what do you want on that agenda?
Well, it's kind of tough for me to second guess what Becky has in mind at this point. You didn't give us our work plan in the packet, did you?
It is so old that it actually doesn't, we haven't really updated it for this year because the committee hasn't met.
Right. But I mean, I know Becky is, her current soup du jour is to stop work with the aspect of freezing of a fire protection system in 324, which, from a perspective of given the source term in 324 and the proximity to Richland is a significant concern for the public. So I'm thinking for right now we would have a placeholder for describing the path forward of the 324 recovery. Having been involved in the loss of fire protection audit, the premature loss of fire protection audit PFP in 2017, it is a significant emotional event. I would think that come August, we would have it would be a joint topic with RAP. That would be my suggestion of what we can do in August. And plus, I know Becky had mentioned before, but the accident with the that occurred with the death, she wanted a traffic topic. So I think the two topics would be transportation, traffic safety, that event, and I believe it's the same intersection at 240 and is it 245, the road from Bend City?
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it's Route 10. And so that would be the two topics I would see as being appropriate for the August meeting. As far as framing questions, do you want to work through them right now, or we can wait for Becky to get out of her mess and work for them? Anybody have any specific suggestions? My thought was, as far as the intersection are there any planned improvements to work with WashDOT to do a reconfiguration of that intersection? Additional turnout or approach lane earlier. That was the discussion before. I know there is a on-site traffic committee that probably is working on it. It could be another framing question would be what was the outcome of their discussion and feelings. As far as the 324, I think the questions are going to be path forward, risk, public risk associated with doing the work in the building without fire protection and how it's being mitigated.
How long do you think the lack of fire protection is going to last? Is that a temporary thing or a
Well,
longer term thing?
they broke the pipes and they claimed they weren't going to fix them. But this is a breaking. They broke last night, so we don't know where it is.
Okay.
That's the subject of the stop work, according to Becky.
So they're in the process of figuring that one out.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's why I'm saying it'd be appropriate for a briefing in August.
Can I make a request that we just, if DOE can do it, to address that at the June board meeting? Gary, the 324 building stop work, even if it's just
Wait
verbal
for a
update.
minute.
Let me see if that's something we can do. I will ask.
Well, I mean, from a HSEP perspective, it would be, obviously, no one expects freezing temperature. I'm not sure if I want to get any peaches this year, but April is kind of unusual. But did we lose any other fire protection systems out on site because of the freeze? Is the annual freeze protection program, not accounting for climate change? Although I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, I don't think this is the coldest April we've ever had here, but it might be that they're using average temperatures to maintain their freeze protection systems. But those would be the general aspects of an August HSEP meeting.
Thank you. Are there other things we need to capture?
Nope. I don't see anybody jumping up there.
Okay. So I will send this to the committee leadership. Got one more committee meeting this afternoon, and it'll be a wrap on this week. I'm in Richland next week, scouting locations for hybrid meetings and figuring out the back end stuff. Gary,
Actually,
Brian, Roberto, do you have anything, last words?
I'd like to just ask one question, Tony.
Yeah.
When will I officially receive a notice that I'm through in June? I haven't heard anything yet official.
Tony, your current appointment letter that you have should say what your term is. So it should have said July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2022, I believe. And we're also planning to send out letters to all of the board members whose terms have expired. We'll be doing that in June. And so that'll be pretty much the that. There's typically not a letter that says you're done. As we talk about, it's a, the appointment letter says it's effective from this date to this date.
Yeah.
And then then we'll send out something that says thank you for your service.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And of course, we hope that you remain active as a member of the public, because frankly, that we've got a lot of great knowledge with some of our board members who have served for a while that we want to be able to pass that on to incoming members and other folks. So we hope that you remain engaged. And we also know that Liz is stepping off the board as well. And same invitation is going out to everybody who is stepping off the board, is that we appreciate your service and we ask that you remain engaged. And it's high probability that even though you don't have a vote, you still have a voice. And because of your experience, that if you speak, you betcha somebody's going to listen to you. So hopefully that helps explain that process.
Thank you.
And Tony, don't feel bad because I won't be a member in the August HSEP meeting.
Okay. Well, it's been a good run.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
Yep.
Right. I think we've got it covered then.
Ryan, Roberto, they were queued up. Anything they want to say?
I think Ryan had to drop off. We're trying to make sure that we get a meeting together next week with DOE to go over all of these inputs from the various committees and try to find a place that we can all agree on the path forward.
I think I saw a scheduling from Ryan on that this morning, so I may crash the party.
Well, it involves you, so that may be a good thing.
You can actually
Oh,
see how
Ruth.
short I really am.
Ruth, I want to tell you I attended a composite meeting or a virtual and in-person meeting that was held in the Richland library, and it worked okay.
Cool. Yeah, there are a lot of pieces, so.
Well, I attended virtually, so I don't know. The people that there in person had a fine time.
Thank you. Right. It's a wrap. Or actually, it's an HSEP, but
Okay.
I
Well,
like it taking some time back.
with that, I think I'll adjourn the meeting early.
thank you, Richard.
All right. Take care.
Good
Thanks,
discussion.
everybody.
Very good discussion. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.